Kia ora, thanks very much, James, at the end of the table for being here for our civil defence briefing. I was just looking at the wrong piece of paper. And Brett online. So I'll just kick it straight over to you. Take us through the presentation. Do you want questions through it, or do you want to run through the presentation?
I'm comfortable either way.
Okay. We'll just play it by ear, see how it goes.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Awesome. Kia ora everyone, called James Thompson Tokawinga. So I'm the Group Manager, Group Controller for Civil Defence Emergency Management. And I'll start, because it's not in the presentation, but I'll start just with where we fit in the Environment Canterbury sort of system. So we're part of Community Preparedness and Response to Hazards core service, sitting in the Hazards Operations team under Lee Griffiths and under Brett. So that sort of gives you the context of where we sit. And I'll talk a little bit more about, what the responsibilities look like as we go through. But yeah, I think please do ask questions as we go. I'm using a national presentation that we use for all elected officials as much as possible across the whole of the country, but I've put some other bits of contextualisation into it and talk through those. So the first thing is it's been busy. If we look at this chart here, really since Christchurch kicking off and Canterbury kicking off with the earthquake sequence, and then through into 2015 with all those mostly storm events, the last 20 odd years have been busy. And you look prior to that, very little. I think the biggest event that I responded to in the early 2000s was the snow event in 2006, and there was a couple of pandemics, otherwise a little bit of flooding, otherwise not much else in Canterbury, and you can see where we're at now. Within this one, just showing the number of state of emergencies, but I think one of the things to note here is what's happening in the insurance space. And I actually, it's not here, but recently saw a presentation from the Insurance Council about the costs. And the last 20 years, they've got a graph that sort of goes up and down. And then 2023, Cyclone Gabrielle doesn't sit there because it pales in comparison to all other events. It's just massive. So insurance is going to continue to be a challenge for New Zealand in this emergency management space, and we're already seeing some of the insurers withdraw from certain communities because they deem the risk too high. So Marlborough is one of those from an earthquake perspective, but and we'll see that continuing. What does that data actually show us? It is mostly flooding. Most emergencies seem to occur in that sort of February-March period. That's in line with the cyclone season or ex-tropical cyclone season, and then into the start of winter, where we tend to get a few deep southerly storm cycles that come through. And those are, we typically see a large storm cycle in winter in Canterbury that causes some form of disruption or a state of emergency being required. And this is just the sort of the long list of what's happened in Canterbury. It's not just flooding. There's the pandemic. There's the Port Hills fire. There's the red wind warning, and then most recently the flooding in Banks Peninsula that you will all be aware of. So what is a hazard? A hazard for us is anything that could contribute substantially to the cause of an emergency, and particularly for us when it becomes a life threat, a health threat, or a property threat, then under the CDM Act we can start to provide coordination and support to our communities for it. It's often thought of as being natural hazards, which are all listed there, but more and more we're seeing technological hazards, cyber attack, terrorism, unfortunately, pandemic, biosecurity, all fitting in under things that we could end up either leading or having a support role in. And I think that's, it's important to think not just natural hazards. Definition of emergency from the Act is it's caused by a happening, and then there's a whole list of things that are the happenings from, just as I said, the human-induced stuff, the technological stuff, and the natural hazards stuff, and including things like war-like activity. That then causes or may cause loss of life, injury, illness, distress, or endangers the safety of public, and that cannot be dealt with by the emergency services or otherwise requires a significant coordinated response. So we've got to have all three of those pieces in place. I think it's fair to say typically we won't get the emergency services saying they can't cope anymore. They tend not to. But they are very, very quick these days in saying that they want a significant and coordinated response. And that's what happened in the red wind warning in last year, in October last year. It was FENZ and police coming into us and saying we want to get ahead of this so that we can coordinate and support the communities that were impacted. There's the legislative responsibilities within the Act is obviously the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, Local Government Act, the RMA, and its replacements will have an impact, the Building Act and the Biosecurity Act. And I think it's worth just noting too that, because you will all be aware of what's happening in the Local Government Systems Improvement Amendment Act, but that's indicating still that emergency management will be a core function of local government going forward. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of these legislative changes at the end because, as you know, it's creating uncertainty for what it looks like in the future. So the CDM Act is the main piece that we do look at. It talks about promoting a sustainable management of hazards. In other words, understand our hazards, communicate those really well to our communities, and then manage them under the 4 Rs of reduction, readiness, response, and recovery. But also in there is Section 64 that sets out the duties of all of our local authorities, and one is that we must plan for and provide for emergency management, and the other is that we continue to operate to our fullest possible extent, even though that might be at a reduced level during and after an emergency. So that impacts this organisation. We've still got to be able to do all the things that we do, though some of that might be at a reduced level.
Got a question from John Faulkner.
Yeah, thank you. So I just reflecting on this, that Section 64, ensure its function, be able to fullest possible extent. So, new councillor elected shortly before the wind event in the Huranui, and I can recall being in COVID and wandering around like a chook with my head cut off, wondering I should be able to do something, but I didn't know who to contact, have any information on what my role and responsibility was. 6 months later, I'm still in the same position. So I look at the supplementary information, and it's got, elected rep guide, top tips for representatives, etc., what I need to do and know, and it just, there's a real knowledge shortfall, and when I think that needs to be covered off, especially for the rural ones that are out there. I feel like I've fallen through the gap.
I hope that part of the purpose of this presentation today is to hopefully fill those gaps. But where it doesn't, it opens up further conversations with me or my team or someone else, either as a council or individually. At some stage, I should actually get you down to the Justice Precinct building so you can all see it and know where we operate from. So I'll create that as an invitation at some stage. But yeah, please, after this, if you've still got gaps in knowledge or things you want to know, please reach out to me. Please reach out through John, who's the emergency management rep on our joint committee. Yep. I think that's this piece here about being able to function to its fullest possible extent. It's an interesting statement, and what does that actually mean? What do you drop, what don't you drop? But a lot of that comes back to business continuity planning for the organisation. Part of that's to make sure that we can function. Things like our telemetry and our rivers and harbour master and some of those sort of more those parts of the organisation that have to function during an emergency can. Wrong button. I like this diagram here. It always used to be up the other way. It always started with the National Emergency Management Agency, and we've turned it upside down. Emergency management starts with our community. It's our communities that often bear the brunt of whatever's happening, and they are, along with the first responders, police, FENS, St John, are the first to respond. Next comes our territorial authorities, and within there I'll include regional authorities from the council piece. And then we've got the emergency management group that delivers joint initiatives and coordination across the region. And NEMA provides, I now say they're the steward, the operator and the assurer, and we are seeing them do bits of that. Sometimes maybe the operator's getting a little bit into our space, but we deal with it and manage it. And of course, Mark Mitchell is the Minister for Emergency Management, and recently Chris Penk was added as to support Mark around recovery in particular. Examples of the partners and people we work with, welfare agencies, different advisory groups. So a couple of key ones for us is our rural advisory group and a response planning group. They're quite important parts for us. Our lifeline utilities, businesses, emergency service, and the list goes on further than that. Health's another one that's really important. And, for your awareness, with all the changes in Health New Zealand to Whare Ora, Ministry of Health, they're actually quite hard to engage with at the moment. So a piece that we're working on to try and remedy. For us, so each council must be a member of a regional civil defence emergency management group, unless they're a unitary authority when they form their own ones. And under Section 17, there's a list of things there. What we have for Canterbury is we've taken Section 17 and created an MOU between all the councils, signed by the chief executives and the mayors. Just thinking now, I should probably provide that to you just for your awareness, and you'll sort of see some of the responsibilities Environment Canterbury has to support us and the work we do. So I will share that with Ollie, and he can share it with you. Well, you've got it, Ollie, anyway. So the MOU, here, could you share that with the councillors? Awesome. Then we've got the sort of the structure of how we work, and for us here in Canterbury, we're a very devolved group. The territorial authorities actually retain a lot of responsibilities. They have their own controllers, and they deliver the service to their community. So here you go with the councils at the top. We then have a joint committee, so the mayors or a nominated elected official come to that joint committee, providing that sort of strategic governance for us. And then the coordinating executive group, making sure that, which is all the chief executives of the councils and our partner agencies, making sure that we're implementing the decisions of the joint committee in a way that is appropriate. And then we've got the group office, and so as I said, our office, around about 17 staff at the moment, based down in the Justice Precinct building. So just just there for your awareness, our structure down at the Justice Precinct building, from the CDM legislation point of view, Environment Canterbury is both our administrating authority and also a member of the Joint Committee. And then I'm the group manager, group controller, and then we've got various portfolios that look at risk reduction and resilience, operations, recovery, and then we've also got a thing called the Emergency Management Training Centre. It's a private training establishment registered under NZQA, mainly for delivering training qualifications to our volunteers, but also to our council staff from the Emergency Operations Centre and Emergency Coordination Centre point of view. One thing I'm wanting to look at with MTech is possibly looking at how we can expand its capability to actually support more training nationally. So might come back to you with some ideas on that at some point in time.
Is there any qualifications us councillors could get from you? Do a one-day course and get a qualification out of it.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to stay away.
I don't think there is, Dion. I know some councillors and some of our territorial authorities have worked in EOCs before, and if that was the case, they get the EOC, the Emergency Operations Centre training, but they have to work hard around unpicking that role of doing the work and then governance, and some do it well, some struggle. We've never had Environment Canterbury councillors come and do that, but I certainly welcome Environment Canterbury councillors to come down to the EOC when we're activated, when it's good timing, and actually see what we do. So, yeah.
Because it does lead into the question that John Faulkner kind of was asking, is that when an event does happen, what is the role of a councillor? We are very connected with our communities. We're engaged with our communities, and I know when they had that wind event, they didn't have communication, so it was very difficult. So I think the question that John was asking is more around, and I've had a number of events that I've been a councillor through from both the city and here, and unpicking your role is quite tricky when you've got your community feeding you information. So I think that might be something that would be useful to unpick.
I've got some bits here that will cover that. They might not cover them to the extent that you want, but at least it'll start taking us on a pathway that will support you and what you do in the community.
So I've got John and then Andrea.
Yeah, no, just supporting that. It's not a criticism of the presentation at all. It's more I think it's a little criticism of the induction process for new councillors when we came in. My understanding of my role in the civil defence in an emergency was that I sort of stay out of the way of everybody. Let Mr. Sunkel over there take control, but I do stay out of the way most of, but but it's knowing who to be able to contact, the actual position where I sit, and if I need to do anything, yes, I know who to go touch base with, and I think Dion's 100% correct there. Needs teasing out a bit.
And Andrea?
I have a question on the far left, the advisor for community resilience, just below the team leader. How does that look to the community? Just because I have a community, I'm the chair of the Resident Association Sumner, so we've had to do our own tsunami evacuation plan, and we've got funding from CCC. We've had a bit of support from CDEM, but I'm just kind of interested in community's the big piece, right? But I want to know how the community gets the information. Yeah.
Fantastic question. So the role of that community resilience advisor is to support and the community advisors that each council has. So if you've been engaged with the ones from Christchurch City Council, that's great. And I suppose one of our regional challenges is that delivery into communities is done in different ways depending on the capacity of that particular council. So this person's role is to try and make their life easier by providing the resources and consistency and focuses during the year on what we would be developing with the community. Once again, I could easily make introductions to Mackenzie, who has that role, and she's new to it, but it's looking pretty exciting what she is thinking about. It's not a new role, but she's new to the role. Right. And going back to Councillor Faulkner, your thing, I do have some suggestions in here on things that will help. And the intent was that we did this when you first started, and for multiple reasons, it's only now that I've got to present to you. So the Canterbury CDM group, we're funded through a targeted rate or a uniform annual general charge through the Environment Canterbury rates process. As I said, we're a devolved model, leaving a lot of the delivery at a local level, and our role at Region is to try and create the consistency and make sure that councils are appropriately staffed up and able to do what they do. It can be fun at times. Yeah. So each council funds their own emergent struggle, especially our smaller councils. And then, as I said, we coordinate and lead a work program. And interestingly, we've only had a robust regional work program in the last couple of years. Up to that stage, previous to that, there was a group office program, but not a regional one. So that MOU I talked about that we'll get Ollie to send you, plus a work program, we're trying to get more consistency and more joined upness, if I can say that, across all of our councils, all of our partner agencies and the work we do, with the intent that we each go to our councils during annual planning or long-term planning processes and say a similar story. It's a little bit like plucking hen's teeth, but I think it's the right way for us to move forward. Working with Environment Canterbury, absolutely key partner to us. The hazard science team, so Tim's team provides the foundation for our work. They support us in creating a hazard profile, which, if you recall back to that first part in the CDM Act, is the foundation for where we work. The river team, or the hydrology and the river team, key partner in our work from a flooding point of view. We're sort of almost working and connecting with people from that team 2 or 3 times a week, and our territorial authorities are doing the same. Absolutely key part for us. And then our to work, and currently we've got about 120 staff at different levels of training, and we have been working with ELT around some targeted engagement around how we can get people into areas where we've got some shortfalls. But we also engage with the team here from regional transport, climate change, waste management, the pollution hotline / hazardous materials team, and there's probably others that I've forgotten about, but we are regularly engaging with, with this organisation and within the organisation. And lastly, we've got a volunteer. So New Zealand response teams are volunteer teams that we have throughout New Zealand. We've actually got 5 here in Canterbury, which is awesome. These are the volunteers that go and help in the community during a response. For us, they're often key to providing the first piece of information, the reconnaissance after an event has happened. And we've got a regional team, NZRT1 or RATS, so that's fully supported by Environment Canterbury and wouldn't exist if Environment Canterbury couldn't do that. So it's a very cool thing. Why have we only got one?
Why is it?
Oh, why is it number one? So I don't want to go into a history of the response teams, but we were the first team in New Zealand to register, and I was actually the team leader at the time in my volunteering space. actually, no, I wasn't the team leader. I was almost the team leader. Back in 2000 and I want to say 3. And then Nelson Tasman followed very quickly afterwards, and then a whole lot of others throughout the rest of the country. So Christchurch City have 3 teams, Waimakariri have a team, Selwyn have a team, and we have a team. Timaru had a team, it never quite got to the point of registration, and it struggled. I think just too around that coordination centre staffing, the other piece of work that we're trying to improve here in Canterbury is in the recovery space, and we know that most recovery is looked after by the territorial authorities, but if it's a larger event we need to provide that regional coordination, and so we're looking at what we need to do to step up to do that. So yeah, the 4 R's: reduction, readiness, response, recovery. Reduction's about, I'll go through each of these so you'll get to see those. So the first in reduction there, roughly through international research, $1 spent on reduction saves $4 to $13 in response and recovery. If we do reduction well, if we do it really, really well, we should not be needed. So how can you support in reduction? It's about looking at your programs that mitigate the impact of natural hazards. And as we go forward with these new government changes around the Resource Management Act and how we do that, it's going to be really important for you to be aware of that and how to influence, dare I say it, the word that's often being used, don't build in dumb places.
Can you give some examples of reduction programs in Canterbury, just so that we can get our heads around what you're meaning by reduction?
I think probably the piece of reduction that stands out the most to me is the work that Huranui District Council's doing at Amberley Beach, where they have worked with government organisations and other community people to buy a parcel of land that's away from Amberley Beach, and within 10 to 15 years, maybe 20, they will start to develop that piece of land, and then the community will move. So Amberley Beach is being heavily eroded at the moment by the sea, and they've estimated that they've got sort of 10 to 15, maybe 20 years at the most before the sea has inundated the community. So that's a really neat example of reduction. They're doing a similar thing for some people in Motunau Beach. They would be the 2 biggest examples I've seen. Things like happening here in particularly Christchurch and Selwyn, when new residential developments going in, they're putting the swales in to hold the water, so the water retention, so it then can be released slowly into the rivers, so the rivers don't flood. That's another example of reduction that is helping. Yeah.
After the Port Hills fires, we had more pine plantations going back in, and also up our gully in Valley in Sumner is the mass planting of kānuka, which is highly flammable, and all this rank grass, it's not being grazed. It's sort of like, have we learnt anything? And yeah, in the vegetation management of the Port Hills.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, it was more Fens that did this with some support from us and with Christchurch City, particularly after the second Port Hills fire, was have conversations with the landowners around what plants, particularly native plants, are worth planting to reduce the fire risk. But other than that, we find it very hard to influence where a pine plantation's built. Personally, I'd probably like to be able to go, no, you can't, but I can't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's why we've got,
Yes.
and that's why the city council have got sheep up there now to eat the grasses.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need more sheep. Sheep. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Okay, no, all good. So I think I've covered those things there. Reduction is hard. We live in an environment where development and building, there are huge pressures on us to do that. It would be nice just to see us thinking a little bit more about not building in places that are going to be exposed. Yeah. During the, if you're okay with it, during the Auckland anniversary flooding and Cyclone Gabrielle, there were houses that were only just newly built that they knew were in the flood zone and had to be bought out. And they were only been built in the last couple of years. So that's the environment we're in.
I've got a question from Nick Moody.
Thanks, James. What was the swales you mentioned to reduce flooding?
Yeah, so just when new developments are going on, and there's a lot around Springs Road in Hallswell, a lot of those new developments have got large water retention basins built into them. So basically to capture the stormwater, hold it, and then slowly release it into the rivers. And if we think about the flooding that we used to have in the Heathcote River here in Christchurch, every winter it would be flooding. Now we don't see that flooding as much. So the swales do work. They hold the water and then release it back into the river over time. Yep.
Did you have a question, Ashley, or was Sarah? Did you have another one? Okay, we'll carry on with the presentation. Yeah.
Cool. Readiness is the next of the R's. This is where we spend most of our time. It's preparing us. It's doing group planning. It's looking at the individual hazards we face and making sure that we can respond to them appropriately. For example, we're upgrading our tsunami planning at the moment to tie in with some changes happening with the zones we use. We're going to a single blue zone throughout the whole of New Zealand. Helen Jack has been instrumental in doing that work with us. AF8, Alpine Fault. If you want, I'd love to come and give you a specific presentation about AF8 at some stage. They're all the sorts of pieces of work that we do, and then our councils are spending their time promoting and working with their communities to strengthen what they can do. Then we move into response. And this probably is the piece that interests you quite a bit. I mean, what can you do during a response? And we've got here, one thing is, if you're out in your communities, feedback what you're hearing to the controllers, either at the local level or at the regional level. Feedback to me or the TAs what your community is telling you, because that's useful to know.
Kia ora, James. How would, you said feedback to you, you're under the pump, well, it's all going on. How would that happen?
From my perspective, as much as possible, I would want to make time for you or any of our mayors. So it's probably more through John, but it doesn't have to be. I'd make time to listen to you as much as I could during that. I see that as part of my role. The ECC itself, I have a response manager that makes sure that it does what it needs to do. My view is to make horrible decisions and to do that outward facing piece, which is connecting with you if I need to. So I'd make time for that.
So, kia ora, James. So, in the case of John Faulkner, something happens in his takiwā, so he can get out and go around and have eyes on the ground, so to speak. So he could get some intel, go through John, or go directly to you.
Yep.
Just an example. Would that be something?
Yeah, or to, if it was Huranui, to the Huranui Mayor, and work with the Mayor. Murray Black is, in your
John?
case, she's the chair of the Joint Committee and really interested in emergency management, so she would, I'd like to think, work with you.
Yeah, I was going to make that point of connecting back to your TAs, to your mayors, understanding who your local controller might be in a normal space, having that connection. So don't bring it all the way up the top then to try and drive something back to Amberley or Cheviot or Culverden or something like that. So make your connections with your local controllers and mayors for that conversation, and then elevate it if you struggle to get to a point of being able to have a conversation anywhere.
So,
Sarah?
so we should really have those contacts on our phones.
Yeah, I
Ready
mean,
to go.
we're all leaders.
My other comment is that more is less.
So, I mean, we're all
Everyone
leaders
wants
in
to
our
be
group.
active and activated and do all these things. If I have learnt one thing, and the first thing I learnt from the Haranui Kaikoura was when I knew nothing, by the end of that process, I knew that more was less. And stay out of the way and provide information if you need. But we are governors and everyone else is operational, and we are not operational.
I was just going to say, we're all leaders in this space. I mean, we've got our connections that we should have in our day-to-day work, so we should be able to feed those in and find the right people. Nettles?
Just to reiterate and confirm, when the sheesh hits the fan, control goes to you, and normally the various parts of emergency response would play nicely. But if a decision is there where there maybe isn't full alignment, here I am, audit and risk, want to know who's holding the decision stick. Okay.
I'm going to cover that piece because, in the end, I become responsible and have to make those decisions. And I'm obviously going to take advice from governance, people on the ground, the emergency services. But if there is a conflict, in the end, I've got to make that decision. Here's something that I think's really useful from a councillor point of view: dispel rumours and correct information. You what Tiwai Hora is like around opening and closing and the interest in the community about it. For you to, if you understand how that lake operates, and if people talk to you about the organisation didn't open it in time, if you can then go, actually, we did do it in time. We did follow the right things. That, to me, is really valuable. And then champion the response effort. I was going to say this a little bit later on, but I think I'll say it now, and I'm going to say it really carefully. When I've presented particularly to mayors on this in the past, I say to them, I'll promise to keep you informed about what we're doing if you promise not to make promises to the community. It's really hard when an elected official or someone from government says, we can do that, and then we go, actually, just at the moment we can't. It might come in the future. We had that over in Little River when the director of emergency management came. So we've got to be really careful about what we say with the community around giving them the support they need, but not giving them, not over-promising, because it again becomes very hard for us to manage. So I hope that's okay saying that to you.
James, just putting my Little River hat on. When you said it wasn't a big event to the community, they thought it was huge. No, it was just interesting on how do you scale the events, even though, because 350 mil in the catchment was one in probably 250 year flood, but in a sense, you said it wasn't big. And how do you work on that scale?
To me, the scale is about when other parts of our community systems can no longer work. So it may not have happened as quickly as the residents there liked, but the Student Volunteer Army came, Task Force Kiwi, so Task Force Kiwi is another grouping, volunteer grouping we have in New Zealand, that come and help in that sort of end of response and that shift to clean up afterwards. And the military don't like coming and doing that sort of work when someone else in the community will do it. So yeah, maybe not as quick as we could have, or ideally, but we had other options for there. We did have the military on standby in case we had to do evacuations or transport of people, using the Unimogs or using their big trucks. But there ended up being no call to us that was a requirement. Yeah, it's often that recovery, the end of the response, the recovery when people are trying to clean their house up, get back to some form of new life. That's when Defence Force will come in and help if they really need it. Yeah.
Genevieve?
I've just got a sort of a question with regards to sort of when there's sort of a heavy rain event and then it creates unstable land, like what happened in Mount Maunganui. Is it Maunganui? Yeah. And I guess my query is because in the background, I was asked by someone who actually created a modelling system that did actually alert to some of these things that were about to happen. In fact, that he put out actually what he called a watch notice rather before the red. And so he could see a sequence of events forming that wasn't enough to trigger sort of that type of response because it's hard to actually show the evidence. But I guess what sort of, if it happened here and there was a heavy rain event, what can we do, or what triggers are alerted in that scenario where you might have erosive land or built in areas below slopes that aren't stable?
Really good question. So for the North Island particularly now, Earth Sciences New Zealand or GNS have some of that predictive modelling. We don't have much of that predictive modelling for Canterbury. However, what we have learnt from Banks Peninsula will go into their modelling so that next time we get rain, we will have that modelling. It's very new, and it's sort of it's in that borderline of being accurate science, but it gives us the guidance to what we need to be able to start looking at what are the warnings. Banks Peninsula was a challenging event in that the orange warning that we got actually indicated more issue for Kaikoura. And so Environment Canterbury actually shifted some hydrologists and river team up to Kaikoura, and then Kaikoura got nothing. Banks Peninsula got it. And originally it was going to be 200 millimetres or 220 millimetres over 48 hours. And in the end, I think we had about 190 millimetres within 24 hours, and it ended up being over 300 millimetres. And some of you will know Minister Mitchell was not happy necessarily about some of the response, but when we're looking at the Met Service as our national provider of weather information and warnings, and then it ends up being more than they predict, it's hard sometimes to sort of go, do we actually push resources in, and do we tell the community? There'll be a lot of learnings out of this event that we will take forward, and some of that will be, when the weather is doing more than what the Met Service indicate, what do we do to get on top of it? Yeah.
And we're really lucky here. We've got some good data that we get a hold of, and having conversations with the chair of Horizons at the moment, who do not have a weather radar, a rain radar, sorry. And that is a real gap in the data. So throughout the entire country, we're not all the same as well, which is a real problem. And, so from that point of view, we are quite lucky, and there are other parts in the country where we should be advocating to make sure that we have consistency in the rain radars.
That rain radar is it's essential. Really, and it provides a fantastic service to us. But also Environment Canterbury and other councils and other organisations, rain gauges. The Met Service use Environment Canterbury rain gauges to understand what's actually happening on the ground. All an important part of a whole collective system. This bit here is the piece on the declaration of a state of emergency, and whether an event, natural or otherwise, has occurred, may cause loss of life, injury, etc., and cannot be dealt with by the services, or requires that coordinated response. They're the trigger points for considering whether we declare a state of emergency. So we use we've got
Ashley. Sorry, I just got a question from Ashley on that slide.
Haven't some state of emergencies been declared preemptively because you know something's going to happen and you suspect it might be this?
And because that says or could happen, we can do the preemptive one. Christchurch City have preemptively declared for heavy rain for Christchurch City previously. Can't think.
We did a preemptive one on the first few days of our term. What was it, John? That was it the wind?
The wind warning.
It was the wind. So the
wind was preemptively declared. Yep. So yes, it is.
And that was a region one. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So we've got guidance that takes us through how to have a conversation with the mayor, or in our case regionally with John, on how to make a declaration. So there's a checklist of a number of considerations. It's a conversation with the emergency services, and then we make a decision as to whether we declare or not, or defer it, or whatever we need to do. When it's in place, so only the mayor, a regional council chair, or so John being delegated that responsibility. And it does actually say and or any other elected representative, and when you start to dig into local government rules, they've got to be delegated in their, I can't remember the name of it, your standing orders. Then we can declare that state of emergency. I, as a controller, any of our controllers cannot. That'll be like me being a dictator and saying, I'm going to take over now and have all these powers and do all sorts of crazy things. So there's things in place to stop me from being crazy, if I can say it that way. And if I do go crazy, you can remove me. So councillors can remove your controller should they not do the job right. The group controller, so me or one of the other group controllers during the time, become responsible for the emergency. So, whether that's a declaration just at a ward, or a whole TA or multi-TAs, or for the whole region, in the end, I or the other group controllers actually become responsible and have to direct and coordinate the resources made available to us. Local controllers direct and coordinate as well, but they've got to follow my direction. So if they're doing something that I think doesn't fit in a best use of a resource for the region or something, I could direct them otherwise. Normally it's a robust conversation first, but if we had to direct, we can.
Joe and then Nettles.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite like, it's kind of funny we joke about it, but that's like a big part of the law is kind of putting limits on that power around control. Because isn't there a number of troops or something you can direct? Like, isn't there?
If the military, technically I should be able to go out to Burnham Camp and get what they call their light emergency response group activated. And it's not a 24/7 thing, but they can activate it very quickly. Generally speaking, that still means, I I can start that process with Burnham. I still need to go to NEMA saying I've requested it, and NEMA will go to Joint Forces Headquarters. So there's a bit of a process triangulation here. But generally speaking, if it's urgent, they can release staff quickly to help. Yeah. And they like a state of emergency being in place to do that. When you read their guidance, it doesn't have to be, but they tend to say it does have to be.
Nettles?
I feel the weight of the responsibility
It's a big responsibility.
in caring for you, probably more than anything, with the best intent and getting as much information as you can, you try and make the best decision in the moment. If for some unforeseen reason later it's found out it wasn't the right decision, do you have any legislative protection?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I do have legislative protection, only when a state of emergency is declared. In that period, in the lead up to a state of emergency being declared, or if one doesn't get declared, and I do some direction which won't have a legislative standing, and it ends up being wrong, I would then rely on Environment Canterbury indemnity insurance to protect me.
So we've got about 8 minutes left, and we've got about 6 slides. So we'll run through the slides and then do questions at the end.
Awesome. Okay. So in here, from a regional point of view, we tend to talk about support, coordinate, direct. So that's the way we try to work, where we're supporting the TAs and partner agencies, coordinating with them, and then direct if we have to. So in this response thing here, here's some more additional responsibilities to think about from you as councillors. What can you do to support me? And I think that's just that conversation with each other that I've talked about. Feel free to ring me. Sharing information with other councillors. So I'll regularly update John on what's going on. And I hope, John, that you're able to then forward that on to... Yep, awesome. And then having that visible presence in your community to help create public confidence, listen to them, share that information back to us so that we can give them the confidence that we're doing the right thing. And then
just on that point, when we had the declaration of the emergency in Banks Peninsula, and you had the ministers down and you had a few other things, there was no presence of the regional council. We didn't know that it was happening and whatnot. And because it is flooding, it's coming from rivers, it's coming from other things. I think there's a gap there that we need to address. It would have been good to have either Ian or myself at that space to be in presence of both, with the minister, to give that confidence to the minister. I think we can sharpen up that a little bit.
So I think when the minister's here, I can pass on to John to pass on to all you that the minister is visiting.
Yep. Yeah, because there's definitely always the mayor, and which is appropriate.
Yep.
But these responsibilities do intersect, and I think we need to be a bit more careful, especially in the current political environment
Yep.
that we're showing a combined face.
Yep, sure. I think this liaising with external agencies and central government, we know that elected officials can go and connect with people in central government, often around funding, and it does help us. It helps with setting up meal relief funds and all sorts of things, so that lobbying into central government can be really useful. Recovery is the coordinated effort and processes to bring around the restoration of what's happened. It can take a long time, it costs lots of money, it gets very but we're starting to do a lot more work around recovery. And here's some things that you can do. Once again, listen to your community, show that political leadership to make sure that we are doing the right things during recovery. And a big priority for us in Canterbury is how do we set up a regional recovery office for larger recoveries so that we can be better prepared for the government piece, which would be something like Sarah or the Cyclone Recovery Unit. We want to be ahead of that so that we can work with them rather than against them, which is often what's happened in the past. Interestingly, Auckland is just in the process from their learnings appointing a team of 5 people into their recovery space. So the recovery bit's getting more important for us.
I've got John, I think you've got something important to add to this.
I was just going to state that's where Auckland have got to, but they're also winding back their team from the flooding events, and their recovery team was about 135 people. So you think about what administrative burden and challenges of putting a significant recovery in place. But yes, they've recognised whether it's 5 or 6 in that recovery space. Other jurisdictions have at least 2 or 3 in that space, and we've just put an extra one in. So recovery starts when the response starts, and the planning starts before the response. So it's a shift in thinking.
Thanks, John. Just a couple of last slides here. Just there's some useful resources. There is this one that we've sent round, which is our own guidance. I've been told by some of the mayors I need to update it on particularly the front cover. But anyway, useful resource for you. And there's also the link in the presentation to some of the National Emergency Management Agency resources that I think Ollie's also shared with you. And I'll just finish with some things that are, hot for us at the moment that I'm sure that you will have awareness of these. The first being the Emergency Management Bill. It is saying increased responsibilities, and it's not giving any indication how we're going to fund it. So you will have all heard this from other parts of the organisation before. Trying to understand how all the other pieces of legislative reform that particularly involve local government, what it means for us. If I put, and this is just my thoughts and crystal balling, I can see that they're not well linked necessarily at the moment, and there will be amendments made pretty soon after they get put in place to fix up these links that aren't there.
And if you think about who works in the Justice Precinct on our event, there's like 160 odd of our staff. Environment Canterbury are registered. They're not all there at once. But if this entity isn't there, where do those people come from?
Absolutely. We would struggle. We wouldn't be able to do it at the moment. That note that the country is responding to more events on an ever-increasing basis, and the current minister is very active in response. He turns up in places before the NEMA staff actually get there. And that's their issue, but it causes issues for NEMA. And then community expectations are increasing. We're seeing that at lower thresholds. We do a lot of work around community resilience, but we also see communities expecting more. So it's a challenge there. And then we do surge support Canterbury staff and Environment Canterbury staff. And Environment Canterbury is really good at putting forward people to go and help in other parts of the country. Often our comm staff are the first to put their hands up and are well respected in the work that they do in other parts of the country. So, big kudos to us as an organisation around how we support the rest of the country. And I know I've taken the whole time up. Thank you very much.
I've got 2 questions, and that'll be all we've got time for. So from Nick, and then I'll come to you at the end to sum up, John. Nick and Sarah.
Oh, thanks for the presentation, James. Really interesting. Great to see the focus here, the 4 R's, emergency management, the reduction beforehand, and reducing exposure to risks through not building in dumb places, and with increasing disasters and emergencies and expectations and decreasing rates. It seems very timely point, and certainly having worked as an ECAN staff for a few months at the ECC under your leadership, I can attest that you run a really tight ship, and it was awesome, really well done. During COVID, I was really impressed, so yeah, keep it up.
Sarah.
Yeah, again, with my integrated catchment management eye on this. There's so much that we could be doing to reduce our hazards, natural hazards especially. But the funding, it certainly is, made my mind alert. And so for our long-term planning, is there areas that you feel that we should be really addressing for that as far as change?
I think that, so in previous papers to the Joint Committee, and John, please support as needed, there have been 3 areas that we want to get better at. One is our lifeline utility coordination. So currently that's contracted, bringing it into as a staff position. I would like to look at what that looks like and how we would do that. So that's one. The second is we've got 0.6 of an FTE in funding currently for a mana whenua advisor position. For the size of Canterbury, 0.6 of an FTE is not really going to work. So, but we need to do a lot more work with the Runanga to understand what they want, for us to talk to them about what we want, and then how that position would actually work. Previously, it was Ngaitahu part funded in Otago and Southland. We never managed to get that established here before Ngaitahu changed how they operated. So bigger discussion there. And recovery, as we've already talked about, increasing that. And when we increase recovery, how that integrates within the team, not just to do recovery, but to how, community resilience and all the stuff that we've talked about. So that'd be the 3 key areas at the moment. The new bill, that will drive other conversations around community engagement. We've got to engage more with disability groups, rural groups. Not quite clear exactly what that will look like yet, but that would, there will be increases. And we're going to get more standards and rules from NEMA that will also require us to consider how we do things. Things like controllers, my position, there will be a specified competency framework that I have to meet, and it will cost money to meet it. So things like that.
John, do you want to wrap up?
It's just briefly, and touching on a few of the points that James has made in his summary, how we fund. And we had thoughts and ideas about recovery managers, more of them, the lifelines, mana whenua, rates caps and sinking budgets and a whole bunch of things sort of collapsed those conversations. We did manage to get the recovery manager in again. But if there was a conversation to further employ some more people into that space, would be very, very helpful and useful. And I look at the EM bill that sits before us and the expectation that comes from that. I look at what other jurisdictions are doing in the recognition of what needs to happen as opposed to what they thought they needed. We still need that uplift. And so I probably sit here as a driver with no particular foot in any territorial authority, being able to say this is what we need to drive an organisation. But if we could find a way through for a couple more of those roles and build a team, and I think Auckland are talking about putting their recovery managers, lifelines and community advisors all into one group where there's a certain amount of interoperability and the like. So if we can move to that within the constraints of our rate rises and caps and things, that would be very, very helpful. And finally, just touch on our role. Our role is to understand what our community's concerns are in an event, but we're not managers, we're not officers, we don't operate. We need to understand, as we said before, who we can feed information into, and particularly at a local level, because that's where you hear it from. Come back through me in the role, or whoever has this role in the future if you don't get it there. But it's kind of know everything, see everything, say nothing, or very little, and don't get in the way. So thank you, James.
Thanks,
really
Rob.
useful.
Thanks Thanks, John, and thanks, James, for the presentation. We need to move on to the next presentation, but really appreciate the update and all the work that you've been doing. And as you said, it's very busy, and it will only continue that way if current trajectories and predictions result. So we need to be ready.
Cool. Thanks for your time, and if you want me to come back and add more at any time, please let me know. Yep. And do you want copies of this? If anyone wants a hard copy.
And you don't need to update.
Yeah, I was disappointed my photo's not on any of them, so we didn't.
Some of that number of years then.
Do they?
Yeah, oh yeah.
It was a time. It was a time. Yeah. Yeah.
Just take one of those glasses.
All right, let's kick in, team, to this. We have Giles, Stuart, and Derek will be talking to us about an Aranui trial service to provide a briefing in relation to funding and options for a trial to improve public transport for Aranui residents ahead of a council decision in March. So welcome to the table, Giles, Stuart, Derek. The count. Yep, we're moving on. We've got to do this. Yep. Go.
Am I on? I am on. Cool. Okay. Reason we're here today to give you a heads up on a paper that will be coming to you in just under 2 weeks' time regarding a potential trial service in Aranui. So we're aware there's a fair bit of community campaigning. We've got some advocacy from local MP and councillors as well to improve public transport service in the Aranui community. You can see on the map there the two existing routes that serve Aranui. It's only 1 kilometre between these routes, but the urban form, the street layout in Aranui is not very permeable. So it means while in theory, no one should be more than 500 metres from a bus route, it's actually quite a long way to walk to get to these routes. The challenge that gives us, while it increases the walking distance, makes it less permeable, also makes it pretty hard to put a good public transport service into the area. In terms of some of the context around this, the funding, etc. So there's no trial proposal in our current work programs that was put forward through the LTP. We're currently kicking off work on a network review. That's to come up with a 10-year plan for improvements. Consultation will start on that in May, June this year. By the end of this year, we will have a good feel for what's coming out of that work. And that work does include looking at alternative service delivery models, which may or may not be useful for this area. Funding-wise, it wasn't in our NLTP bid, so if we do a trial, it will be 100% funded by ECAN, and we'll need to take that money out of reserves. Private revenue is always there at the top of our minds at the moment, so anything we do, we've got to think about the impact on private revenue, and likelihood is that any proposed trial will not generate cost recovery at a level that will improve our private revenue. We did also look at an option to reroute one of our core routes. That was ruled out for a number of reasons, but amongst them the legibility and the ability to maintain the frequency on that core route with a diversion in place. You've seen this slide before, I think, through PT Futures work that Sonia's presented. So this demonstrates the areas in and around Christchurch where we do not currently serve communities, and that's the big red blobs. Now, these are the large areas. There are, based on customer feedback, a total of 126 communities that are requesting service at the moment. So Aranui are very much not alone. When we look at what is it that we can do quickly, really limited to options B and C on this slide. That's where we've got existing contracts in place. It's our kind of bread and butter delivery model. We know the legal framework we're operating in. We know it's feasible. So I've put two potential options there. One is repurposing an existing route, and one is a new route. And they're up there because they're the quickest things that we can deliver. Options D, E, and F, these are looking at alternative delivery models. So with these options, we think there is potential to deliver something that provides greater community benefit and or at a lower cost. But there's a lot of feasibility risks here. It's not something that we've done before. It's not something we do as standard. There's lots of legislative fish hooks and hoops we'd have to jump through. So there's a risk here that we could put a lot of work in and actually not get to an outcome. So those are the potential options that will be put forward in the paper in 2 weeks' time. Want to be very mindful. Anything we do with regard to a trial, if we're going to implement a trial, it will result in delay to one or more of the items on our current work program. I'm not going to labour through all of these, but they are all pretty high priority for us. So ultimately, our advice as part of this briefing and also in the paper is that we do not proceed with a trial at the current stage, and that's because of the resource implications and the implications for our work program. Our advice is that we pick this up as part of the network review, and that will give us the opportunity to plan for resource and budget anything that comes out. But I cannot sit here and give you a guarantee that that network review is going to come out with a proposed trial in Aranui.
All right, thank you for the presentation. I've got one question, and I'm going to go to Joe as the core service lead to start. You, on that last slide on the work program committed activities, you said that if we did the trial for Aranui and then you would have to stop something there. I mean, there's another option that you can just come to us and say, if you're going to do that, we're going to need some more resource to do those other works. I mean, that's completely in the control of the council. So, you know, is there a resourcing issue that you have in this public transport space that we need to have a conversation about to allow you to have some extra resource to do the things that the council is asking?
It's a little bit of deja vu.
Yes.
Because we've been having this conversation for quite a few years. And we have, in the last 6 months, recruited significantly more resource in our team to enable us to do the approved work program. The resources that will be required are specialists, they're public transport planners, public transport schedulers, and these folk don't grow on trees. So we can go and find more of them, but that will add delay from a recruiting point of view. So that it's always a possibility to find more human beings to do the work.
Yeah, I just think it should be used as an option rather than just saying you will delay this because we want that. There's always other options available to us, and we need to make that call and understand the pros and cons to those. So I just wanted to say that. Now, Joe, over to you.
Yeah, just firstly, thanks for getting this back to us in this kind of time course. It's been a good couple of years to get here, but it's great that we've got something coming to council. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is just around what will the options be in the council paper?
Yes, the options are the ones I've got on the slide here. So option A is do nothing. Option B is to repurpose the 155. 155 is one of our lowest performing routes at present. But to be clear, the bus that does the 155 is currently used at peak time elsewhere. So to repurpose the 155, we could only deliver an off-peak service through Aranui. Option C is to look at an entirely new bus service, so just get a new bus and put it in. We reckon we could deliver about an hourly service between Eastgate and New Brighton for about 600 grand, give or take, not having done the detailed work. And then D, E, and F, as I said, there's real potential to do something with community vehicle trusts that should be really quite low cost compared, for example, to option C. But again, a lot of investigation required and uncertain feasibility. Total mobility taxi subsidy, probably something that might be much more popular. But again, I guess it depends on the level of subsidy and how exactly we would enact that and create the linkages to our network. Don't know at this stage. And then e-mobility is similar, again, has really big potential for high impact, low cost. But there's a lot of unknowns and there's a lot of feasibility challenges.
So they will all be there as options for, okay. And so in terms of option B, this is a bit of a new one to consider. So if we decided to go with option B, there'd be a process where you'd go away and look at what the remodel would be, like work out the route. And so that's open to, that might not be a Brighton Eastgate remodel.
Yeah, we could look at a few different things that we could do with that. Based on the discussion we have with Councillor Campbell, understand that there's a desire for linkages to New Brighton and Eastgate, so that's what we've focused on. If we were to get other feedback, we could look at something else. I know, I think previously there was it Eastgate to the Palms or New Brighton to the Palms service in there? That would be an option as well. I mean, the Palms provides great connectivity to Route 7. Eastgate's got the Orbiter, it's got Route 5. So both are really good hubs that if you get yourself there, you have much wider access to our network.
Last question. Is there a bit of a hybrid option between B and C in that we don't remove 155, but we only do a kind of skeleton service like the 155? Rather than an hourly bus?
Yep. As Derek said, with the 155, it's an off-peak only service. I think it runs 3 times in the afternoon off-peak period. So because those buses would have to go somewhere else at the peak time, we have to factor that time into what level of servicing, because it's a very low performing service. And the reason it's a very low performing service is because the level of service offered, 1 bus an hour, and the destinations it serves are simply not attractive to people. And that has been the theme for many, many years on our network, where councils before this council have had this conversation many times around repurposing services that have very low engagement and very low use. And even this council has been tasked with doing that from government and the GPS recently. And so we have the 97 in Rangiora, which has a subsidy of $22.90 per trip that we need to look at. We're considering the 135, repurposing that to service the growth on the 44. This option is to repurpose the 155. And so if we repurpose these assets to effectively replicate what we're turning off, the likely outcome is the same, a very low performing service. It meets a specific social need, absolutely understand that. But I guess you're simply, you're not moving forward with a network outcome. That's the point I'm trying to make. And trying to seek a different outcome by doing the same action doesn't necessarily move us forward. we fully appreciate and understand as staff that there are many parts of our community that are not well served by public transport. And if we had the resources and the funding today, we would service them all. But we don't, and the expectations on us from our funders are that we are getting the most out of what we have. And that inevitably means that some folk are going to miss out.
Ashley.
You just knew I'd ask questions, didn't you? First question, comment. In developing these models, have you discussed them with anyone in Aranui at all, or have you just developed these based on your own internal knowledge?
Yeah, so I guess firstly, I wouldn't necessarily say we've developed the models. This is a pretty high level. What is it that we can do quickly? I guess the point is we need a council decision to direct us to do the work to actually flesh these out.
Okay, so the reason I ask that is the reason people are asking for a service through Aranui is it's a high deprivation area with a significant disability and elderly population who can't walk to either side, even young single families with multiple kids who can't get their kids to either side. So I actually think, to be perfectly honest, that option F shouldn't even be there. I can see why you might consider it in some places, but I think it's totally impractical for what we're looking at here. And I personally would like to see it taken off the board because it's not meeting the need. The other, I have two more questions. In the Aranui community came here and sat where you're sitting over a year ago. If we don't do anything now, but put it as part of the network review, then, and if that network review spits out a service for Aranui of some sort, when would that happen?
That would be a council decision in terms of prioritising what funding we have and what resources we have.
Okay, so what's the earliest it could happen?
If council wanted to fund it entirely themselves, then after the work has been done, council can make that decision, just turn it on straight away.
Okay, so if you started the review in May, June this year, and you had some sort of interim result by December this year that was saying, yeah, we could probably do something in Aranui, then we could get it going by March next year?
That's a very difficult question to answer because it would really depend what it is. If it's a simple, if it's an option C type of thing that came out in December, then with some good tailwinds, we could be talking first quarter or early second quarter. But if it's an option D or E, then it'd take a lot more time to shape that option and get it off the ground.
Okay, that's cool. And the reason I ask this is that they've already been waiting more than a year to hear something from us. And they haven't been jumping up and down, they've been patiently waiting. So for a community where some people are already stuck in their suburb and literally can't get out, 2 years is a hell of a long time to wait. I'll just leave that there. My next question is, looking at option C, around 600,000 a year. All that I've heard from the residents of Aranui is that actually they're not, while that level of service would be utterly delightful and they'd love it, they are not actually expecting that. So if we looked at, for example, an off-peak only hourly service, which is kind of partway between what Joe's proposing and the full service, we're looking at 6 buses a day, every day, including weekends, between 9 and 3. My calculations, depending on what I'm looking at, put the cost of that somewhere around the 250,000 mark. Would that be your understanding of what such a off-peak hourly service 7 days a week, 9 to 3, would cost?
Yeah, it's another tricky one to answer on the spot. So the first question would be, can we get a bus from somewhere that is doing peak time only runs and is available for the off-peak? So I'd need to confirm that, and then that gets rid of the PVR costs. So immediately then I've knocked 100 grand off the cost. Beyond that, it really depends on the length of route, the number of trips, because it's down to the number of kilometres and the driver hours. So I would need to cost that. I couldn't give you a straight answer here. But yes, ultimately, if we can find a bus that's doing something else on peak and we run it off peak only, it will definitely be lower cost than the 600 grand.
And so my final question, and I'm going to raise this because you raised it, New Brighton to the Palms. And the Palms is a hub, and they can get the 7 and the 60, which would take them to Christchurch Hospital. That also creates a brand new route from New Brighton going somewhere where we're talking about reducing the service with the 135. So it gives actually a very direct route from New Brighton to the Palms. And it also just happens to go past the entrance to Wainoni Pack and Save, or one of the entrances, which at the moment people who don't drive in New Brighton can't get to. So I'd actually quite like to, and it takes in Avondale, which is another non-service area. So the more that I've thought about this, the more that I've thought that that's actually a much more practical route in terms of providing more incentives to more people, not just Aranui, to use it, and not duplicating most of a route that's already there, which is the number 5. Those are my thoughts.
So what you've just described there is the service review that we're undertaking to identify combinations of destinations and routes that make sense, that are attractive and add to our network.
I absolutely accept that. My concern is the time factor. When these people were identifying a social need in late 2024, and we're still talking about it. And so I absolutely accept that. And if I knew that we could come out with something within 2 years of their starting to ask, I'd go with that. I'm just really concerned about the social need that's there now.
I've got a few other questions of
that's
people,
it.
so I
I'll
need
stop.
to go. We're running right out of time, so I'm going to if we can get through these questions relatively quickly, this will be a paper that comes back to council. So Andrea, and then Megan, did you have a question too? No, I thought
Right.
it was John.
I'm usually quick. So this new tap-on thing, with the Route 5 every 15 minutes and the Route 80 every 30 minutes, and there's a couple stops in there, can we get information about, with the tap-on, how many people are getting on in these sort of hard to get to? No.
So we have existing boardings data for each stop on the Route 5 and the Route 80.
And there's not many people. I remember that from the last thing. And I appreciate, yes, it takes forever, but this business case review of 1 and 5, there's going to be stuff in there that covers some of what Ashley's talking about, or none of what Ashley's talking about, these other ideas.
None of what Ashley's talking about. Route 5 business case is about uplifting that existing route to turn up and go frequency to improve its amenity and patronage attraction.
So is there no way to get any of this, your next slide, into the list? Because that 1 in 5 is coming at the end of the month, isn't it?
Well, the investment cases, the money's not.
Yes, we're working on trying to get some money out of the government. There's lots of advocacy that we need to do there. It is year 3 of the budget. I'm going to go to Peter and then John and then Genevieve and then Nick, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Look, I don't believe that A is something that we can settle with. In my opinion on this, people from Aranui have been to us a number of times and made some pleas with us. And when it comes to bus routes, we all want to try and compromise and not upset anyone. But it seems to me that B could be the ultimate decision here that we could make that could give relief pretty quickly. And from a financial perspective anyway, we could look at actually recovering that. And I would offer up, the thing that I would offer up from with that is that the people of Littleton, although it's just an hourly service, may also have some gripe with that. But we could look at Littleton about setting up a community car in Littleton. Because there is a true community in Littleton that could support that. Now, I know that when we try and do stuff with buses, Stuart, and you've been here a long time and know that also, that it becomes very emotional. I would hope that we could cut through some of this and give the service to the people that needs the service.
John?
No, I'll pass. I think most of my questions have been answered.
Excellent. Genevieve?
I absolutely understand the situation you're talking about completely. It does feel very deja vu, and it's quite weird. I'm just looking back with a wee risk lens and just making sure that, because when I look at the PT Futures Improvement Program and how we're reviewing it, my concern is that if we
Find this solution.
So the thing is, when I look at the review and how it will be due June this year, that also will look at service model alternatives and any gaps. So if it is not identified that this is a particular need, then do we have the ability at that point in a few months' time to say, actually, now's the point?
The results of the service review won't be available until the end of the year, so we won't know until it starts. The community engagement starts in April, May. Yeah.
Nick?
Just to support the chair's request that when the options paper comes to the council meeting, it's got that option around if we did want to fund this, how we would do that from the funds that we've got. Yeah.
Claire? No. Claire first and then John.
I'd just like to ask staff to include some of the feedback that they have got right across the network. So I'm thinking of Waimakariri requests that have sat on our table for probably 5 or 6 years, also wanting services. So just making sure that we get some information in the paper around other competing services as well as the Saranui request.
John?
Very, very briefly, I support Councillor Scott and his views. I believe there is a social responsibility for a community that does suffer some deprivation, and if we can look at option B, I would lean towards that as a way forward, but that's a decision for the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what Peter and John have just said myself as well, and I think there's a scope there to do something, because I'm remiss to not say that, Yoldhurst and Hallswell have been probably coming to this council for a long time, and we could keep going about all of the communities that haven't, that want these things. But there is a deprivation in this community as well that we do need to consider. So I think there's some clear indication there. But I'll just let the staff close off before we move into the next briefing.
Yeah, really useful feedback. I just thought I'd summarise as the director the reason that the staff advice will not be not to proceed. Obviously, it's a council decision, and the paper will also include, as well as the information we've provided, will also provide information on the last time that buses were provided to the Aranui community and whether they were a success or not in terms of patronage. But it is our advice is really based on the existing strategies and policies of the council and its partners, the resources that we have available, the government direction and the work programme that we already have, and the fact that, as has already been indicated, we have multiple communities in Christchurch who are desiring additional public transport. We are seeking to respond to the strategic direction set by council and to look at the network holistically. However, that obviously does not preclude council making a decision that does not take staff advice.
Excellent. Thank you, team. Appreciate your free and frank advice, and we'll look forward to the paper coming to us on 25th. Thank you. Moving into the next briefing, straight into it, we've got Brett Aldridge and Anna Stewart. Will be talking to us about Fast Track Approvals Act and Environment Canterbury Regional Council's role to inform us on the Fast Track Approvals Act. Anna, nice to have you at the end of the table. Over to you.
Lovely, thank you for having me. This is really just, I guess, an updated guidance around how the Fast Track Approvals Act operates now that the amendments have come through. I want to talk through a wee bit about our role in the process and how we contribute to the outcomes from this. I'm happy to take questions as they pop up, so if there's something that's burning in your mind, please let me know, and I'm happy to cover that off for you. So I think for those that haven't met me, I'm Anna Stewart. I'm the team leader for the Significant Consents team. We look after the fast track applications that come through. So I've been involved since almost the beginning, around the time that the first application came to us, which was the Genesis application. So we've learned an awful lot since then and have built some really strong processes about how we respond to these requests. So I will talk you through just the pack, gives you a bit of updated context around what we're working with in terms of the legislation. So if we can go to the next slide.
You've got it on the
me?
computer next to you.
Okay. For those that weren't aware, it's really legislation that's designed to facilitate the delivery of infrastructure and development projects that hold a significant national or regional benefit. So that's the main test that these applications need to satisfy. It replaces the requirement for multiple separate approvals by bundling them into a single application, which is meant to streamline the process and reduce public input and the potential appeal rights. So I won't read out all the details on each slide as I go through, because I know you can probably have death by PowerPoint, but these are probably the main aspects that it's intended to incorporate and replace. Thank you. There's two ways that projects can come into the Fast Track Approvals Act. So they're either listed under the legislation already, or they are referred by the Minister for Infrastructure following an application. So we have seen a number that have sought referral in Canterbury so far, of which a couple of them are in progress at the moment. The EPA checks these applications, and then once accepted, they are referred to the panel convener, who will appoint a panel who will consider the application and the feedback that has been provided by all of the iwi and local regional authorities that would contribute and provide advice around these applications. So they'll often seek advice from us around the aspects of the applications in terms of the ecological effects, and so we work very closely to try and provide a really robust response. We get very limited opportunity to provide this reply, so we do try and engage with them very early in the process. We've just recently released a What Does Good Look Like guidance document for applicants that really helps them set out what a really strong application would include. That enables us to do a comprehensive review early in the process, thereby sort of mitigating some of the challenges around the tight timeframes that come through with this legislation. They're only declined if the adverse effects are clearly out of proportion to the national or regional benefits, and so there've only been a couple, I think, that have been declined, but they have been very well set out as to the reason for that. So I think there is a lot of confidence around the considerations that do go into these applications once they get to the panel. Up on the screen there you can see one of the newly released guidance documents from the EPA around the process, so it's still fairly complicated. There was an earlier document that we received last year that sort of set out the process and the different steps that occur along the way, and I can talk to our role in this process in the coming slides. But effectively we assist with the completeness check. So
is this what Fast Track looks like?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I know.
It is how my brain works sometimes. I'll tell you what, that's not Fast Track at all.
No,
I mean, sorry.
no.
Keep going. Yes.
So In terms of the process itself, where do you sit? You sit as an expert planner. So you're called in for your expert advice in terms of the region.
Sorry, panel or planner, did you say?
Use your microphone, Peter.
The panel calls you in for your expert advice. So you're considered expert advice. Thank you.
Yeah, so that would be, there's a couple of stages in the process where they seek our opinion, which is that completeness checks, or the is everything in the application required to be there? Have they met the scope? We tend to provide an initial response at that stage, and we do rely a lot on what we've been able to understand from that pre-engagement that we work through with them to understand where there might be issues or perhaps gaps. For example, management plans in their application. The second stage would be at the 53 comments, where we provide our most substantive feedback around having reviewed everything that's been submitted and worked through. Even once the application was lodged, we continue to work with them to refine the issues, and the panel expects us to spend as much time with them as possible, really working through what we can resolve before it's put to them for consideration, and then really leave only that matters that we weren't able to close the gap on completely for the panel then to consider and decide. So it's not quite our... not quite RMA. Again, it's different in the sense that we're not deciding. We're simply providing feedback and guidance.
Use your microphone, Peter, because there's people online.
So I appreciate that you're not a decision maker. So no, I understand that. But in terms of the process, it's a fully I can't even find the words in my own head here, but the fully legalised process under the RMA that you're considering these things, because that's the advice that you're bringing, how it fits in our land and water plans, those sorts of things.
We basically, we do advise how it would fit under those plans, but most of what we're providing is commentary around the application, any environmental risks, and the impacts of the proposed activity. But we do give context as to how it would have sat under the RMA in terms of the rules that would normally have applied under the RMA. Stage, once the panel is stood up, the panel convener will, when she's determining the panel members, will have considered the degree of consultation that's occurred up until that stage and setting the timeframes. So that has certainly influenced their decision in terms of how long that they will set out for the application to be considered and the matters decided. The panel convener has said that she relies very heavily on the guidance that we provide the panel in terms of the key matters that will need to be addressed throughout once the panel is stood up and sitting. We have very strict timeframes in terms of meeting those requirements, i.e. if we miss it by a day, then we potentially have forfeited our opportunity to provide any feedback. There is no kind of going over timeframes and continuing to have input into that process. So that's why we work very hard to try and get all that information as early as possible in the process and encourage applicants to do that. To make that more successful, we have actually split the way we will invoice for that time. So we'll have that pre-application stage in the process. We will invoice the applicant directly up until the point that it's lodged, and then once it's lodged, we do that through the EPA.
Joe?
Has our technical advice changed any outcomes?
It certainly contributes to the direction of the decision and the pathway that the panels consider. We do, again, provide very detailed technical evidence around concerns, particularly with ecological impacts and habitat management and endangered species. And that has, for the applications that are in progress at the moment, particularly with solar farms, does lead the panel to focus on the matters that we're concerned about. So it certainly is heavily relied on in their decision.
John?
Can I give you an example and you can walk me through so I can get my head around it? So the Hurunui plan has a limitation on weir on Lake Sumner, and I'm aware there's some in the zone committee basically took it off the table twice. Now, under a fast track application, could that decision be overturned?
Should they lodge an application again? Yes. Again, it's that test around are there significant regional or economic benefits? And really, again, only when the impacts of that proposal are outweighed will that be rejected. So there is certainly application examples which perhaps would have been not successful in the past that would be successful under the fast track which is why, again, we're very conscious about putting everything forth that we can to really illustrate where we think the issues are, so that the panel has an opportunity to consider those and balance those when they're making that decision. Cool. Next slide. To date, we've been involved in 19 different projects that are currently at various stages within the fast track process. We have had one approved under the fast track, which is the Genesis renewal, the Hydro Scheme application. We have 6 other projects that have applied, which have all been accepted with the decision-making panel underway. One of these was a referred project. We have a further 4 that have been referred to fast track since, so that are now we're just waiting their substantive application, but we're continuing to work with them on their application, and again work through those potential issues to the extent that we can, and then really only leave the matters that aren't able to be resolved for that panel to consider. There are some that we're almost potentially all the way through that, so by the time the panel has been stood up, there's not an awful lot that they will actually have to consider again, which makes that decision-making process quicker and cheaper, and it means that the conditions set that comes out the other side, we're comfortable in being able to manage those, so it really gives us a strong footing in knowing what's coming our way.
Nick,
we have.
I've just got a question from Nick Moody.
Yeah.
Thank you. The one project in Waitaha that has been approved under fast track, you said it was a Genesis what, sorry?
Yeah, it's the renewal of the Lake Tekapo Power Scheme project. So, yeah.
It's the existing dam and hydropower generation plant.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's just a renewal of that. Yeah, that. Yeah.
Which was actually quite a good one to have for the first one, because there wasn't a huge degree of risk for us in terms of learning the process as that went through. But we did learn very quickly that the panel convener had a high expectation, even with that one, around our pre-engagement before that panel was stood up, so that we again could understand and work through the issues and have that condition set well worked through before. So we've used the learnings from that one to inform how we approached the other ones since.
And can I ask how the cost recovery piece worked for that particular application? Did we get the full amount back, and was that process relatively smooth? Because it's pretty there's a lot of ambiguity in that.
That's right. Because we hadn't had really the pre-engagement with that one, we didn't quite know how the legislation lent itself to that pre-engagement. We didn't have that initial RMA number for that one, but we have had the full cost recovery. So I think we're one of the few councils that hasn't had a single pushback to our cost recovery efforts. So we've been very careful to well document what we invoice to ensure that that stays the same.
Yeah. There are gaps in the science that provide the information that may be required. How's that handled?
Do you mean gaps in the application that comes to us, or our own science?
Well, Tim probably won't appreciate this, but basically what I'm saying, science that's unknown in terms of the application.
So that's where we will engage external experts to help us. For example, if there are significant gaps in the application, or if there are matters that are of significant scientific importance, then we will get that peer reviewed by either our internal science teams or go external if that isn't available in-house, so that all matters of that nature are addressed thoroughly in our response.
Sarah?
This is a question around the conditions that are set up for these projects, and then the responsibility of the monitoring and compliance of that. I've got 2 questions around this. So that's the role for regional councils, is it?
There are some conditions that are us and some for the TAs. So we will work with them on conditions, but more and more we're providing guidance around, here's an example set of conditions to applicants early in the process, so that we can actually put them on the right track to start with. That's probably one of the main advantages to fast track, in that we can make recommendations rather than just wait to see what lands and then critique it. We can actually input meaningfully into the architecture of the application to help have those conditions be fit for purpose once they come through to us.
Actual funding for this compliance and monitoring, regional councils will need to fund these projects, as far as the addressing those conditions.
I think that would be much like RMA applications, where whatever the resulting consent was, we would administer in the same way.
Yep.
Yes.
Just to follow up, the Makaruru Dam is a fast track project in Hawke's Bay at the Ruatana for water storage scheme. It was referred. So I know it's not a Canterbury project, but that would have been extremely comprehensive in its monitoring, hydrology, ecology, tracking eels and all sorts of things. It was a hugely complex project. So that is certainly part of what you'd be looking at as a project, the whole cost of these projects over the consent period, which would be 35 years or so. Are those costings being taken in consideration? The life cost of a project, operational cost.
Yeah, it's perhaps not a question for us to answer in consents. I don't know, Brett, whether you wanted to respond to that aspect of it.
Just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Yep. Just to confirm the question, so this is the costs of ongoing compliance monitoring that we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so that we would charge directly as we do for any other consent. For our hourly charge, every hour we spend on the monitoring of that consent would be charged back to the consent holder.
Genevieve, and then Nettles, and then DC.
I find this so interesting, and it's probably a very new way of thinking for you guys. So I applaud your work. Goodness. Just with regards to when you assess and compile everything to go to the EPA, do you also have the ability to recommend or, like a decline or accept? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're encouraged to do so. I think the guidance that we've had from the panel convener is to make that decision-making process as straightforward for the panel members as possible and really point them in the right direction or the direction of concern. So we will make recommendations within our response.
In the past, if there's been projects that have been scrutinised and not consented, and they reappear on your desk as a new fast track, is there, I guess, a concern from the applicant to say, well, hey, it's the same people looking at it? Is there a concern with that sort of mindset or, of conflict of, reviewing it again?
We have seen an application seek referral, which was the White Rock Quarry or the ProTrans one, come back through, which again had not progressed under the RMA. So they obviously at a hearing stage they've suspended pending the outcome of their fast track application. We provided the section, the completeness check comments, and gave our opinion, which was largely based on our report that was scheduled for the hearing for that application, and that one was rejected by the EPA. So it did not meet the economic test or that regional benefit. So we were able to rely on the same information that we'd already compiled in terms of our response to that, which recommended that it not proceed.
And how long would it have taken if it hadn't have gone through fast track? First part. And second part of the question is, as you do more of these, will there be a natural agility at having a time framing? And third part of the question is, will you put in sort of your own internal sort of KPIs that a fast track should be taking this long?
Perhaps slightly difficult to answer the question around the initial one because, again, of the scale. Obviously, there's multiple types of consents and parties that they would have had to work with. I know that the Meridian application that proceeded straight through to the Environment Court, which was very similar, has probably gone through in fairly comparable time to the Genesis application, but by going again straight through to court rather than through the normal RMA process that we would have undertaken. So potentially comparable, but I think in terms of the way that we would work with all the other stakeholders, where you can really get in around the table and work collectively. So for example, with DOC and Forest and Bird, Fish and Game, you're really doing all of that at the same time. So in many aspects, there can be significant benefits to progressing through fast track. Because we had to stand up our response fairly quickly, and as we learned more about throughout the process, we have tried very hard to have a really clear process guide around how we process and consider these ourselves, so that if we had to onboard 3 more people, that it was easy to learn how we do that. But ultimately, we've taken the approach of making sure that we can, again, through a really comprehensive response to whoever is considering these applications, and have built guidance documents to all of the technical experts that we would engage to simplify that process, i.e. when we're seeking external tech, hey, this isn't the RMA, this is the legislation that actually covers this request, and here's how we would like you to respond, so that there is a lot more clarity around what we're asking for in order to get the outcomes we need to put forth.
Sorry, and just the last bit, will you sort of set yourself sort of in, hopefully with fast track, it'll happen in this time frame as opposed to that, how do you keep yourself accountable to make it fast track?
That's really over to the panel convener based on the application and the level of engagement we have from applicants. There are some who perhaps see it or had seen it as a golden ticket, or purchase a pass and you get what you want. Whereas I think that's proven to be not so straightforward in that sense. So it depends on the level of engagement and the type of issues that they're dealing with. We have seen some that we considered fairly straightforward that we engaged with early in the process. Ryan's Road was one of those, where the applicant had engaged well with us and we had worked through all of our issues, but they perhaps hadn't had the consultation with other affected parties that have come out throughout the process that have held up the application. And so the panel, if there are gaps or concerns, they can effectively request further information from other parties, which can delay the process, and the applicant can suspend the application themselves if they have matters to work through in order to respond to those requests. So it's not so much at our discretion how long it might take, but rather us really just meeting those 3 key timeframes to provide our feedback, and then wait to see which pathway it takes.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add to your point, Anna. To reiterate, we don't set any of those timeframes. They're all set by, like Anna said, the panel convener, the panel, depending on the project. So it's really a case of we're given a deadline and we have to work to it. So, yeah.
I've got a question from Ashley and then Peter and Yayan. And then we'll go through to the rest of the presentation, which is about the panel, and then we'll come to questions at the end.
So just listening to you talking about the resources and the processes you've developed to make this run smoothly, my question is, are those resources and processes then being transferred to the non-fast track consenting to help make that run more smoothly?
That's certainly something that we're very mindful of at the moment, particularly when we get other significant consents coming through that are going through the RMA process. And in fact, there are some listed projects that have chosen to do that, that have the option to go fast track, but instead of going RMA. So we have a number that we're looking at the same lens. I think the guidance document they've prepared, the what does good look like, we're really hoping we can apply that to a certain degree to these other significant applications, because we have found some really good advantages to working this way and being a bit more explicit in how we collaborate around issues and work through those early in the process. So certainly something we're thinking of.
Peter? Yes.
Given the fact that there's a very limited access to democracy around this, and it's a little bit like witchcraft unless you get to understand it a bit better. And so thank you for coming and doing that. I mean, my question is that, and I recognise that you have no decision-making powers, but and the panel has the right to put consent conditions, well, not the right, but they will put consent conditions on it. In your opinion, the expert advice, which is obviously the only reach that we would have as a region into some of these consents, do you think that that has a big enough influence possibly on setting consent conditions?
Again, it potentially varies based on what the application type is, and again, the level of engagement that we get. We've certainly had some great progress in terms of how we would work through conditions. So there's been plenty of workshops where we'll have our principal planner and planner sitting down with the experts that we have externally and internally, and also the applicant's own experts, and they will literally hot tub and work through those to the point that they can reach agreement. And where they can't, those are the matters that the panel will consider, again with the advice and direction that we put in our responses, so that they know why we're pushing for a certain condition or what the challenges are around potential enforcement if it's not explicit enough to be applied.
Yeah.
Kia ora, Anna, tēnā koe.
Just in regards to, I mean, under the RMA, council will be doing a Section 32, right? So in the fast track, how comparable is it, and in time frame kind of thing? Because Section 32, you know what you're working with, and you're finding your way on this one, in the fast track way. Yeah, just kind of comparable time, cost, and other things.
Again, it depends on the degree of pre-application work we've had, all the engagement with the applicant. We certainly don't get to formally request or put on hold if there's not full information there. So again, it's at that completeness check stage that we really are explicit about where there might be gaps, for example, management plans that we would need in order to assess and consider the effects. We've had great feedback from the panel convener around us, calling out where we see gaps that then they will seek to address, and there has been some, particularly with the solar panel which we have, that are looking at 2 current applications in progress where there were a lot of work to do on the conditions, for example, due to the complexity of the area and the fact that there was 2 solar farms going in the same place, where they have actually directed us and the applicants to work together around the conditions. So they will set aside specific time to resolve those issues if that occurs, and that again factors into the timeframe decision that they will set around how long it needs to actually work through these matters. So it really is at the panel discretion, but when we call up where there's an area that needs further work and scrutiny, then they will certainly do appear to listen to us with that.
So what we'll do is we'll carry on to the next 3 slides, which are around the panel, and then we'll come to questions at the end.
Cool, thank you. So in terms of the panel member nomination, so it states that we must include at least 1 person nominated by the local authorities, and so that's why we try and work with the TAs to put the same name forward so that we can make sure that we're getting someone that we think has the suitable skill set in order to consider the application. If we don't make a panel member nomination within the time frame, then the panel convener will either decide or listen to the TA if they've put a name forth. Interestingly, they don't need to have done the Making Good Decisions course, so they're not necessarily certified. And again, that's partly because of the required skill sets that may be needed. For example, a landscape expert that wouldn't normally have featured in an RMA-style hearing. Typically, they'll appoint, the panel convener has plenty of people with the planning background that she is drawing upon for the panel, and will often now come to us for more of the civil engineering or landscape or other matters that she thinks are valuable based on what the application type is. If we don't get a name forth in time, then we do forfeit that opportunity to make a recommendation, but we also don't, again, have any influence over the decision of whether she takes what she has sought. We'll also work closely with the local iwi. Again, we're very conscious that they don't get the same opportunity to put forth a panel member nomination, so we do try and collaborate with them, share our technical reports so that they have enough of a basis to know what other matters of concern that they will be thinking about when they consider the application and respond to feedback as well. So we do try and work quite closely with them throughout the process, not just at the nomination stage.
At the end.
So usually we're given between sort of 3 and 5 days to make that nomination, which, as you can appreciate, makes it quite challenging to come to the RHC and request that name be endorsed. So we are looking at how we can make that process smoother and easier for staff to get through in the required time frame, because we do want to consult meaningfully with the other iwi and local authorities, which perhaps haven't had the same advantages in terms of resource that we have to respond as quickly to these applications. Yeah, I think I've probably covered most of that. We did sort of have after that first Genesis application came through and we were asked for a planning nomination, we did compile a list of potential candidates that would satisfy that and sought to have that pre-approved so that we could then make that decision or recommendation, put forth that name quicker. But what we found since is that typically now she's looking for different skill sets beyond that planning background. So to have a list that encapsulates all of our potentials, but also the other tertiary authorities and iwi preferences is quite challenging given the scope of that skill set that may be sought. So that does make it difficult to meaningfully liaise and work through who that name would be. That's probably us. So yeah, in order to meet the timeframes, and again, for staff to be spending the time that they have focusing on the response and the important matters that we're putting forth in terms of the matters that we want to be considered by the panel. We're looking to have this delegated to the Chief Executive, who can consider this potentially to be further sub-delegated to the Director of Operations, Brett, in this case. This means that we can spend time focusing on our response and the details that we need, because again, when we're working with lots of external parties, it can be quite challenging to corral all that together and do this at the same time. We don't believe this creates any additional risk, because again, we're just putting forth a nomination. It's not so much that we're making a decision on who that person would be. And we will certainly keep the Regulatory Hearing Committee informed on any material developments and what name was put forth, so that you still have that full visibility over how things were proceeding.
Okay, I'm going to go to thank you very much for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions, but before I take the councillors' questions, I just want to ask Councillor Mackay, Claire Mackay, if you've got anything as the chair of RHC and the core service lead for this area, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, through you. Look, thank you very much, Anna, for the presentation. It's great. It's even just listening to me and listening to you for me today. It's just a really good reminder of the uplift within our organisation and the work that's been required by planners and consents team around adapting to the fast track requirements. I just want to tell councillors that this paper that's going to come to council next week, 25th, has actually come through the RHC committee, and we did recommend that the paper be come to council for hopefully ratification, because it certainly has come to our attention that this very, very short time frame turnaround that our staff are expected to work in, and particularly trying to get agreement, it was on the previous slide there, with other stakeholders is critical to trying to make sure that the views and the opinion of our staff certainly get heard as well as other TAs. So, yep, our RHC committee has endorsed this to come to council for consideration. That's about all I think I need to say, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah.
Yes, I'm a landscape architect and belong to the Institute of New Zealand Landscape Architects. So I'm sure there are plenty of landscape architects who well, not plenty, but there are landscape architects who have had the Making Good Decision course already and have Environment Court or EPA hearing experience. So I think there are people out there to draw upon. How do you go about, tapping on shoulders to get these people?
For the ones that we have had proceed so far, I think there has been an awareness of who was certain strengths in each area. So, for example, we knew as we were working through the comments in the early stages what was likely to be considered. For example, the cumulative effects, i.e. landscape, and again thinking about the Mackenzie Basin and the solar farms. But I think there have been enough names that we have been aware of that we've been able to consider. But again, I guess talking to the other local authorities, they probably have also had more connection with these skill set types in the past. But probably not being a principal or planner myself, I think I've deferred to the team who have the knowledge in this area around what names we put forth and recommend.
Can I assist at all? Is that a possibility or not? As far as, there will be people who I know would have had those sort of experience in those sort of catchments that you'll be working with.
We have just recently, I think last week, spoke to the commissioners within Canterbury and basically talked through the fast track and the panel nomination process. And certainly from that conversation, we did have some people put forth their CVs and confirm that they were available and willing to, should there be the request, to go on to be put forth on a panel. And I think perhaps that's something that we would keep in mind for when the request came through for that type of skill set. I think that's something that has come up.
Deputy Chair.
Kia ora anō. In regards to, talk about iwi, I take that's probably through the prees, is it? And have you kind of front-loaded that mahi so that,
reach out and start having those really early conversations. We have had some where we've had combined meetings with them and applicants or potential site visits. We've certainly, again, like I mentioned, shared all of our technical information as it comes to hand. So we'll set up a SharePoint page and we'll give them access to review those documents, and even in terms of helping them write responses to the panel hearing, so that they can put forth memorandums that set out their concerns as well. So we do work, again, really closely. We do sort of circumvent the traditional process by picking up the phone and having conversations, because we know that resourcing is a challenge for them as well. So when we know that a matter is likely to be of importance to them, we make sure that it pops up on their radar nice and early.
Final question from Genevieve.
Along the same lines as actually what Sarah was saying before, I recall when they were seeking feedback for different changes to like the RMA and different policies, they filtered it through the different institutes, like for engineers, for landscape architects and the likes. So is the same process applicable here for those types of fast-track consents, where the different specialist institutes could actually put forward or collate names that have done similar? Is that how you sort of obtain different names sets? Is it through the different specialist professional groups, or?
Not to date, no. I don't know if you are aware. I think probably we haven't had a huge number where that's been necessary yet. Like I said, I think the solar panel, which is a panel that are considering two, and potentially a couple more applications that are coming through. Again, we're looking for ecologists, which was what we were asked. But no, it was more, I think, based on previous experience from court or from other hearings. But again, it's really the names that we were aware of already.
Yeah. Just going to add to that, we like I said, I think draw mostly on previous experience like that, but I think the key part we try and do is where we get endorsement from both the TA and the sort of local pre in this instance as well. So we try and rather than sort of go into perhaps a more, I guess in some cases, like I said, where we talked about that pre-approved list, it would be quite a sort of generic list of people, say, throughout the region. We try and go for sort of specific people that sort of have relevant skills to that specific area. And that's where, we look to consult with the pre's and sort of get their endorsement, really. Yeah.
I've just got one last question here from Megan, and then we'll wrap up.
Kia ora, this is just a process question. So if I think back to the Regulatory Hearings Committee, back, I think it was about September, so before we were all appointed, there was a pre-approved list of fast-track panel members that Environment Canterbury would confirm. We went through that list again when we were first appointed, because I recall I declared the conflict and my name came off the list. So we went through that process, and now I'm just confirming that our process is to say that our Regulatory Hearing Committee is putting forward this recommendation that we're saying delegate those decision making through to the entity and not to us as governors anymore. So we will no longer be involved in appointing the panel members, because our recommendation is to delegate it based on how quick this moves.
That's correct. So we'll certainly keep you informed as to who we nominate and who is confirmed as a panel member, but that wouldn't come to you seeking endorsement of that name.
Would the list still be populated through the regional hearing the regulation hearing committee? You've already done that, but updates to that list would still go through that committee?
What we're saying is we wouldn't have a list, because the scope of what might be sought is so broad that you couldn't engage. If they were putting forth names that weren't on that list, then we wouldn't be able to agree and have that same name between us. So we're looking to move away from having a list now and just more focusing on working with the other parties that are involved in that recommendation process.
Right, okay. All right, we'll look forward to this coming back to the council coming into the 25th of March. So thank you very much for the time. We're finished for the day, Council. We've got lunch now. Can I just ask councillors to stay behind for a couple of minutes after everybody leaves? Thank you.